I built her a resort, a bloody resort, on land I couldn't even own. And when I asked her to leave, she smiled at me, because it was already hers. It had always been hers. I'm standing on this beach in Palawan right now, watching her laugh as the waves crash at her feet. The sun is setting behind her, turning everything golden and warm, and I can't remember the last time I felt this way. Actually, I can. It was 3 years ago, before Margaret got sick, before the chemo stopped working, before I watched the strongest woman I'd ever known fade to nothing in a hospital bed that smelled like disinfectant and defeat and the end of everything I thought my life would be. After she died, Manchester felt like a tomb. I'd walk down Deansgate and remember the Christmas markets we used to visit every December. I'd pass the curry house on Wilmslow Road, where we had our first date 30 years ago. Every street corner had a memory attached to it like an anchor pulling me down. Every pub we used to visit on Sundays after walking in Heaton Park. Every park bench where we'd sit and watch people pass and make up stories about their lives. I couldn't breathe there anymore. The house we'd shared for 28 years felt too big and too empty at the same time. So I sold the properties. All of them. The rental flats in Salford, the commercial unit in Stockport, the house itself. I packed 2 suitcases with clothes I didn't really care about and bought a one-way ticket to the Philippines. My daughter Emily thought I'd lost my mind. "Dad, you can't just run away from grief," she said on the phone from London. "I'm not running away," I told her. "I'm trying to find a reason to stay alive." She went quiet after that. I told myself it was just for a few weeks. Clear my head, feel the sun on my skin. Maybe remember what it was like to be alive instead of just existing. That was 6 months ago, and everything changed the moment I met Lorie. She was working the front desk at a small resort in El Nido. I'd just checked in, jet-lagged and emotionally exhausted, dragging my suitcase across the lobby tiles, when she looked up at me and smiled. Not the practice smile you get from hospitality workers who've said welcome 1,000 times that week. Something genuine. Something that reached her eyes. "You look tired," she said softly. "Long flight?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She handed me a cold bottle of water without me asking for it. Her fingers brushed mine as I took it. "First time in Palawan?" she asked. "First time anywhere in a long time," I said, and I heard how broken I sounded. She tilted her head, studying me in a way that didn't feel intrusive, just curious, like she actually wanted to know. "Then you picked the right place. The islands heal people. You'll see." I didn't believe her, but God, I wanted to. That first week, I barely left the resort. I'd sit by the pool with a book I never actually read, staring at the same page for hours, watching the ocean beyond the palm trees, feeling absolutely nothing. Numb, hollow, like I was made of paper. Lorie would pass by sometimes during her shifts, always with a kind word. "How's your day, Mr. Brennan?" she'd ask, pausing with a stack of fresh towels in her arms. "Getting better?" I'd lie, forcing something that might pass for a smile. "Good, that's good. The sun helps. Give it time." And she'd move on, leaving me alone with my ghosts. On the 8th day, she sat down next to me. I was in my usual spot by the pool, pretending to read, when I felt the chair beside me shift. "You don't have to pretend, you know," she said quietly. I looked over at her. She was in her staff uniform, on her break apparently, holding a bottle of Coke. "Pretend what?" I asked. "That you're okay. I see a lot of guests come through here. Honeymooners, families, solo travelers. Most of them are running from something, or someone. It's okay. You're allowed to be sad." I felt something crack inside me. "My wife died," I said, just like that. I hadn't said it out loud to a stranger before. Not like this. Not so plainly. She didn't flinch. Didn't offer empty condolences like everyone back home did. She just nodded slowly. "How long ago?" she asked. 3 years. "That's not very long," It feels like forever, and like yesterday. At the same time, she reached over and squeezed my hand, just once, firm and warm. Then she stood up. Stay as long as you need. The ocean's not going anywhere. And neither am I, if you want to talk. And she walked away, leaving me sitting there with tears I hadn't let myself cry in months burning behind my eyes. After that day, we started talking more. Real conversations, not just pleasantries. She'd finish her afternoon shift and find me by the pool or on the beach, and we'd just talk. She asked me about Margaret, about what she was like, about how we met. She was a nurse, I told her one evening as we walked along the shore. Stubborn as hell, couldn't stand injustice, couldn't walk past someone who needed help. She saw me in the hospital after I broke my arm on a construction site, and she asked me if I was always this stupid, or just that day. Lorie laughed. What did you say? I said only when pretty nurses were watching. She rolled her eyes and told me to stop being an idiot. I asked her out anyway. She said no. I asked again the next week. She said no again. Third time, she said yes, just to shut me up. Sounds like she was smart, the smartest person I ever met, right up until the cancer. We walked in silence for a while. Do you miss her? Lorie asked. Every single day, every single breath. Then she was lucky, Lorie said quietly. Why? Because not everyone gets loved like that. She asked me about Manchester, about what I used to do. I told her I'd been a property developer for 30 years. Started with one flat, worked my way up to commercial buildings, residential complexes. Made good money. Lost interest after Margaret got sick. Do you miss it? She asked. The work? I thought about it. Sometimes. I miss building things. Creating something that wasn't there before. Turning an empty lot into something people could use, live in. It felt like it mattered, you know? She smiled, and it lit up her whole face. Maybe you'll build something here. I laughed, but it felt hollow. I'm just passing through. People always say that, she said, looking at me with those dark, knowing eyes. Then they stay. 2 months later, I was still there. I'd extended my booking 3 times. The resort owner, a cheerful man named Mang Tomas, joked that I should just move in permanently, but it wasn't the resort keeping me there. It was Lorie. We'd started spending evenings together after her shifts ended. She'd change out of her uniform, and we'd walk along the beach for hours, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in a small barrio on a nearby island, about her mother dying when she was 15, about raising her younger siblings while studying for her tourism degree, about how she sent money home to her family every single month without fail. Do you ever want more? I asked her one night as we sat on the sand watching fishing boats bob in the distance. More than this? She looked at the ocean, and the moonlight caught her profile. I want to help my family. That's enough for me. But what about you? What do you want for yourself? She turned to me, her eyes soft and vulnerable in the darkness. Right now, this, sitting here, talking to you, it's more than I ever expected to have. I kissed her that night, right there on the beach with the waves lapping at our feet and the stars overhead looking like they'd been scattered by a child's hand, and she kissed me back. Her lips were soft and tasted like salt and coconut, and for the first time since Margaret died, I felt like I could breathe again. Like maybe I was allowed to be happy again. Like maybe life wasn't over just because she was gone. Is this okay? I whispered against her mouth. More than okay, she whispered back. Don't stop. We'd been together for 4 months when everything started to shift. It was early evening, and we were walking on the beach, holding hands like teenagers, and she got quiet. I'd learned her moods by then, the way she'd bite her lower lip when she was thinking hard about something. What's wrong? I asked, stopping to face her. She shook her head, but she wouldn't look at me. Nothing. I'm just thinking. About what? About how sad it is. What is? She gestured vaguely at the coastline. The small resorts, places like where I work, they close down all the time. Every year, another one goes under. Owners can't afford to maintain them. Or they can't compete with the big chains. It's so expensive, and the competition is brutal now. I just wish there was a way to keep them alive. You know, they're special. They have heart. The big places, they're just business. No soul. I stopped walking, an idea forming that I'd be thinking about for the rest of my life. What if we did it? She looked at me, confused. Did what? Built our own place, a small resort, boutique, personal, something with heart, like you said. We could do it together, you and me. Her eyes went wide, and I saw something flash across her face. Surprise, excitement, something else I couldn't quite name. Keith, that's a huge investment. Do you have any idea how much something like that would cost? I've got the money. I sold everything in Manchester, and I've got 30 years of experience in property development. I know how to build. You've got the local knowledge, the connections, the language, the understanding of what tourists want here. We'd be a perfect team. She bit her lip, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her mind. Are you serious? You're not just saying this? Completely serious. I want to build something again, Lorie. I want to create something. And I want to do it with you. Create. She threw her arms around me and kissed me hard, her whole body pressed against mine. Yes, God, yes. Let's do it. Let's really do it. I felt something surge inside me that I thought was dead. Hope, purpose, the feeling that my life still had meaning, that I could still create something that mattered, that I wasn't just waiting around to die. The next week was a blur of possibility and excitement. Lorie knew a foreman named Bobby Mercado. She said he was reliable, honest, knew the local regulations inside and out. We met him at a beachside cafe that overlooked the water. Bobby was in his early 30s, lean and sun-weathered, with a firm handshake and direct eyes. He wore a faded polo shirt and work boots that had seen better days. Lorie tells me you want to build a resort, he said, getting straight to business. No small talk. I like that. A small one, I said. 4 or 5 cottages, main building with reception and restaurant, pool, bar. Nothing massive. Quality over quantity. He nodded, pulling out a worn notebook. It's doable, but you'll need the right land. Close enough to the beach for ocean views. Good road access. Proper water supply. Electricity hookup. Have you thought about location? Not specifically. That's why we need you. Can you help with that? Lorie asked, leaning forward. I know a few parcels that might work. I'll set up viewings for next week. But I want to be straight with you, sir. Building here isn't like building in the UK. Different regulations, different materials, different timelines. Things take longer, cost more. You have to know the right people. I understand. I said, how much are we talking about for a project like this? Ballpark. Bobby glanced at Lorie, then back at me. He tapped his pen against the notebook. Depends on finishes. Depends on materials you want. Local hardwood versus imported. Simple tiles versus premium. But for what you're describing, fully finished, furnished, ready to open, you're looking at around £200,000. Maybe $250 if you want it done right. I didn't blink. Margaret and I had never had children except Emily, and she was doing well on her own. The money was just sitting in my account, doing nothing. Let's do it right then. I want quality. I want it to last. No shortcuts. Lorie squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt her trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered, so only I could hear. For believing in this, for believing in us. I smiled at her, feeling lighter than I had in years. I believe in you. Bobby nodded approvingly. Good. I'll put together some site options. Start getting quotes from suppliers. We'll need permits from the barangay, environmental clearance, building permits. Lorie can help navigate that. She knows everyone. I asked, if everything goes smooth? 6 weeks to get all the permits? Then we break ground. Construction probably 12 months, maybe 15. Let's aim for 12, I said. A week later, Bobby showed us a piece of land that stopped my breath. Half a hectare right on the coast. The sand was white as bone, the water so clear you could see fish swimming 10 meters out. Palm trees lined the back of the property, and you could hear the ocean from everywhere. It was perfect. How much? I asked Bobby, trying to keep my voice steady. 80,000 pounds, he said. Seller is motivated, wants it gone. I looked at Lorie. She was staring at the ocean, her face glowing like she was looking at something holy. What do you think? I asked her. She turned to me, and there were tears streaming down her face. It's perfect. Keith, it's absolutely perfect. I can see it. The cottages there, the pool there, the main building facing the water. Oh God, it's perfect. I pulled out my phone right there on the beach and called my bank in Manchester. I wired the deposit that afternoon, 30,000 pounds to secure the property. Bobby said he'd begin site preparation immediately, surveying, clearing, getting the utility connections mapped out. Lorie handled all the local paperwork. She knew everyone, just like Bobby said. The barangay captain, the permit processors, the environmental officers. She'd bring them to the site, smile, chat in Tagalog I couldn't understand, and suddenly things that should have taken months took weeks. Within 2 weeks, construction began. I stood there the day they broke ground, watching the excavator tear into the earth, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Like I was building towards something instead of just waiting for time to pass. Lorie stood next to me, her hand in mine, and she said, "We're really doing this." "Yeah," I said, "we really are." 3 weeks into construction, Lorie said she wanted me to meet her family. We were having dinner at a small restaurant in town, fresh grilled fish and garlic rice, when she brought it up. "Keith, I want you to meet them. My family, if that's okay." I looked up from my plate. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose. I know Filipino families can be private about relationships." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Keith, you're not imposing. You're important to me. Really important. They should meet the man I'm building a future with." Building a future with. The words made something warm spread through my chest. Okay then. Yes, I'd love to meet them. We drove to her family's home on a Saturday morning. It was in a coastal barrio about an hour away from El Nido. The road got narrower and bumpier as we got farther from town. Small houses with corrugated metal roofs, chickens pecking in dusty yards, kids playing basketball in the street with a hoop made from a milk crate. Everyone waved as we passed. Lorie's house was modest but clean, painted concrete walls, a small porch with plastic chairs, potted plants growing in cut-off water jugs. Her father, Tito Jun, met us at the door. He was in his early 50s, weathered skin dark from the sun, warm eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He wore a clean white shirt and nice pants, like he'd dressed up for the occasion. "Mr. Brennan," he said, shaking my hand firmly. His grip was strong. Working hands. "Lorie has told us so much about you. Welcome to our home. Please, come inside. Thank you for having me, sir. And please, call me Keith. Keith, then." "Come, come." Inside, the house smelled like grilled fish and jasmine rice and something sweet I couldn't identify. Lorie's mother had passed away when Lorie was 15, but her younger siblings were there. 2 boys, 14 and 16, 1 girl, 12. They stood when we entered, shy smiles and polite nods. "This is Kuya Ramon and Kuya Ernesto," Lorie said, introducing her brothers. "And this is Aunt Sylvia." They each shook my hand solemnly, like they'd been coached. We sat down to eat at a table that had been carefully set. Clean plates, matching glasses. a spread of food that looked like it had taken hours to prepare. Grilled bangus, pork adobo, fresh mangoes. Tito June poured me a San Miguel from a cooler. To new friends, he said, raising his bottle. To family, Lorie added, looking at me meaningfully. I clinked bottles with them, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt since Margaret died, like I belonged somewhere again. Over lunch, Tito June told stories about his years as a fisherman, the storms that came without warning, the seasons when the fish disappeared and they didn't know how they'd eat, the time he almost lost his boat in a typhoon and had to swim to shore in waves that wanted to kill him. It's hard work, he said, his voice humble. Very hard, but it's honest work. I've always provided for my family the best I could. I'm proud of that. You should be, I said sincerely. Lorie speaks very highly of you. She says everything she learned from you. He smiled, and I saw where Lorie got her warmth. She's the smart one. She got out, got an education. I'm so proud of her. She's done things I never could. Lorie blushed and looked down at her plate. Papa, stop. It's true, he said firmly. You've made something of yourself. And now you have someone who sees how special you are. He looked at me. I hope you're treating her well, Keith. I'm trying to, I said. She deserves the best. Yes, he said quietly. She does. After we ate, Tito June walked me outside to show me his boat. It was pulled up on the beach behind the house, an old wooden banca with outriggers, paint peeling, engine rusted, but maintained as well as it could be. She's seen better days, he said, running his hand along the hull, but she still runs, mostly. How long have you had her? 23 years. She's getting old, like me, he laughed, but there was something tired in it. Do you still fish? When I can, when the engine doesn't give me trouble, when my back doesn't hurt too much. Age catches up with all of us, no? I nodded, thinking about my own aches and pains. We stood there, in comfortable silence, watching the water. Keith, I want to thank you, he said after a while. For what? For making my daughter happy. I see it when she talks about you, light in her eyes. She's been through so much. Her mother's death, helping me raise the little ones, working so hard. She deserves to be happy. She deserves someone who sees her. I felt a lump forming in my throat. I see her. She's remarkable. He nodded slowly. I believe you do. As we walked back to the house, he mentioned almost casually, the roof leaks when the typhoons come. Been meaning to fix it, just haven't had the money put aside yet. But we manage. We always manage. I looked up at the roof. I could see the worn spots, the patches. How much would it cost to fix properly? He shrugged. Maybe 20,000 pesos. But don't worry about it. We'll get to it eventually. 20,000 pesos, about 300 pounds. Nothing. I thought about it the whole drive back to El Nido. Lorie dozed in the passenger seat, her head against the window, and I kept seeing Tito June's kind face, his pride, his quiet dignity. That night, I transferred the money to Lorie's account. 25,000 pesos, a bit extra for unexpected costs. When she saw the notification on her phone, she started crying. Keith, you don't have to do this. This isn't your responsibility. I want to. Your father is a good man. He raised you. He's taking care of your siblings. That makes him family to me now. And family helps family. She kissed me then, hard and grateful and desperate. I love you. God, Keith, I love you so much. It was the first time she'd said it, the words I'd been hoping to hear. I love you too, I said, holding her close, and I meant it with everything I had left. Construction was moving faster than I expected. The foundations were poured smooth and level. The framing was going up, the bones of our dream taking shape. I'd go to the site every day, watching the workers, talking to Bobby about progress. Every week, I'd wire more money to the project account Bobby had set up, £50,000 for materials, another 30 for labor, permits and fees, equipment rental. It added up fast, but I didn't mind. I was building something real, something that would last after I was gone. Lorie managed all the local logistics. She knew which suppliers to use, which officials needed personal visits, which workers Bobby should hire. Every decision went through her, and I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my partner. This was our future. One afternoon, about 5 months into construction, Lorie and I sat down with Bobby to go over the property paperwork. We were in Bobby's small office in town, fans spinning overhead, documents spread across his desk. "There's something important you need to understand," Lorie said, her voice careful. "About Filipino law." I looked up from the building plans. "What's that?" She glanced at Bobby, then back at me. "Foreigners can't own land in the Philippines. It's actually in the Constitution, written law. No foreign ownership of Philippine land." I frowned, feeling the first whisper of unease. "So what does that mean for us? For the resort?" Bobby leaned forward, pointing at a document. "It means the land title has to be in a Filipino citizen's name. There's no way around it, but you can own the structures, the buildings themselves. And you'd have a long-term lease agreement for the land, 99 years, renewable. In practice, you'd still control everything, run the business, make all decisions. It's just a legal technicality." Lorie reached for my hand across the desk. "I was thinking the land could go in my name. We're building this together, right? And then you'd have full legal rights to the resort itself, all the buildings, the business license, everything. We draw up a proper contract, make it completely official and protected. That way, you're protected. I'm protected. Everything is clear." It made sense, perfect sense. She was my partner, my future. And I trusted her. I loved her. Why would I question it? "Okay," I said. "Let's do it that way. Draw up the paperwork." "You're sure?" Bobby asked, looking at me intently. "You understand what this means?" "I understand. The land goes in Lorie's name. I have the lease and the buildings. We're partners. It's fine." Bobby nodded slowly and started gathering the documents. "All right then. I'll get everything prepared." We went to the notary 3 days later. A small office in Puerto Princesa, air conditioning blasting, notary public stamp on the wall. Lorie signed the land title. Her name in official ink. Loretta Santos, owner. I signed the lease agreement. Keith Brennan, lessee. Bobby witnessed both documents. Everything was official. Everything was legal. I felt proud. We were doing this right, by the book. On the drive back, Lorie was quiet. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She looked over at me. "Just that I can't believe this is real, that we're really doing this, building something from nothing." "It's real," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's as real as anything I've ever done." A month later, construction was really moving. The cottages had roofs. The main building was taking shape. The pool excavation was done. I'd spent over £200,000 by then, but seeing it come together made every penny worth it. This was ours. This was our future. One evening, I was at the construction site talking to Bobby about tile choices when Lorie's sister Carmen showed up. I'd never met her before. She was in her early 30s, thin, with tired eyes. 2 small children clung to her hands. She was crying. Lorie immediately went to her, and they spoke in rapid Tagalog I couldn't follow. Lots of hand gestures. Carmen sobbing. The kids looking scared. "What's wrong?" I asked when Lorie came back to me, her face pale. "It's Carmen. She's being evicted. Her landlord is selling the building and everyone has to leave in 2 weeks. She's got nowhere to go. 2 kids. No savings. Can she stay with your father? The house is too small. 4 people already in 2 rooms. There's no space. Lorie looked at me, and I saw something desperate in her eyes. Keith, I need to ask you something, and I hate doing this. I really hate asking you for money. But Carmen is family. She needs help. Just for the deposit on a new place. Security deposit in first month, £2,000. That's all. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious, if it wasn't an emergency. I looked at Carmen, who was wiping her eyes with the hem of her shirt, at the kids, who looked hungry and scared, at Lorie, who looked like she might cry too. Of course, I said, transfer it tonight, whatever she needs. Lorie threw her arms around me. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. I promise we'll pay you back. She'll pay you back as soon as she gets on her feet. I nodded, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice asked if I'd ever see that money again. I pushed the thought away violently. This was family. This was what you did for family. You helped. No questions asked. The resort opened 8 months later. We had a small ceremony, just us, Bobby, a few local officials, some neighbors. Lorie stood next to me as we cut the ribbon stretched across the entrance. She was wearing a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. We did it, she whispered, gripping my hand tight. We really did it. I kissed her forehead, breathing in her shampoo smell. Yeah, we really did. The first guests checked in the following week. A couple from Australia, honeymooners. They loved everything. The cottages with ocean views, the pool that seemed to blend into the sea, the bar where you could watch the sunset with a San Miguel. They left a 5-star review that made Lorie cry happy tears. More bookings came. Germans, Americans, British tourists. The money started flowing in, and for the first time, I thought maybe we'd actually make this work. Maybe I'd found my purpose again. But something was changing. I felt it but couldn't name it. Lorie was distant, distracted. She'd spend hours on her phone, texting constantly. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say family. Always family. Just Carmen about the kids. Just Papa about the boat. Just coordinating with Bobby about maintenance. It made sense. It was reasonable, but something felt off. Then the requests started coming faster. Keith, my grandmother Nene Rosing needs surgery. Her gallbladder. The doctor says it can't wait much longer. It's 3,500 pounds. I don't know where else to turn. My father doesn't have it. Carmen doesn't have it. I'm so sorry to ask. I paid it, wired the money that afternoon. Keith, my father's boat motor died completely. He can't fish without it, can't earn anything. The repair is 1,200 pounds. I know it's a lot. I know you've already done so much. But he's desperate. I paid it. Started feeling a tightness in my chest. Keith, Carmen's kids need school fees. Private school. It's the only good one in the area. 800 pounds for both of them, for the whole year. She's crying because she can't afford it. She feels like such a failure as a mother. I paid it, but I hesitated first, and Lorie saw me hesitate. That night, she was cold, distant. She slept on the far side of the bed, her back to me, didn't say good night, didn't touch me. In the morning, she was silent, barely looked at me. The warmth was gone. I felt panic rising in my throat. Lorie, what's wrong? Nothing. Please talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. This went on for 3 days. 3 days of coldness. 3 days of silence. 3 days of feeling like I was losing her. On the 4th day, I transferred the money for the school fees. Within an hour, Lorie was warm again, smiling, touching my arm, kissing my cheek. Thank you, baby. You're so good to us, to my family. I don't know what we'd do without you. The warmth felt like oxygen after drowning, but something in me knew this was wrong. This pattern, request, hesitation, coldness, payment, warmth. It was like a switch, like I was being trained. Like Pavlov's dog, I told myself I was being paranoid. This was family. This was how Filipino families worked. Extended family. Everyone helping everyone. I was just adjusting to a different culture, different expectations. But I was tired. So tired. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my stomach clench. Another emergency, another crisis, another request. I'd spent over £300,000 in less than a year. The resort, the medical bills, the roof, the boat, the school, the eviction, the endless small requests that added up. And I didn't own a single thing. The land was Lorie's. The lease was just paper, and I was exhausted. One night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in bed next to Lorie, who was breathing deeply, and I did the math in my head, again and again. £300,000 gone. And what did I have to show for it? A resort in someone else's name, a relationship that felt like it was held together by money, a growing sense that I'd made a terrible mistake. I got up and walked down to the beach, the resort beach, the one I'd paid for, the one that wasn't mine. I sat in the sand and listened to the waves, and I tried to breathe through the panic. The moon was almost full, lighting everything silver. I pulled out my phone and Googled British Filipino solicitors in Manila. I needed to know. I needed to understand what I'd signed, what I'd agreed to, what protections I actually had. His name was Marco Velasco, British father, Filipina mother, based in Makati. I'd found him through an expat forum where people shared horror stories about property investments gone wrong. His reviews were good, direct, honest, no nonsense. I called his office the next morning. Velasco Law Office. How may I help you? I need to speak with Marco Velasco about a property matter. It's urgent. Is this regarding Philippine property law? Yes. I'm a British national. I've invested in property here, and I need to review my legal position. I can schedule you for Thursday, 10 in the morning. I'll be there. We met in his office a week later. Modern building, air-conditioned, professional. Marco was in his late 20s, sharp suit, sharp eyes. He shook my hand and gestured to a chair. Mr. Brennan, tell me what's going on. I brought all the paperwork, the land title in Lorie's name, the lease agreement, the construction receipts, the bank transfers, everything. I spread them across his desk like evidence at a trial. Marco put on reading glasses and started going through everything methodically, page by page. His face got harder with every document he read. The silence stretched on forever. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked at me. Mr. Brennan, he said slowly, do you understand what you've signed here? My mouth went dry. A lease agreement. For the land. While I own the structures. No, sir. This is not a lease agreement. This is a memorandum of understanding. It's not legally enforceable in Philippine courts. It has no specific terms, no duration, no rental amount, no clear obligations from either party. Legally speaking, this document is nearly worthless. The room started spinning. But the land, the resort, I paid for all of it. I understand that, but under Philippine law, the land is entirely in Loretta Santos's name. Full ownership, and the structures on the land, they belong to the landowner as well. Accessory follows the principle. That's the legal doctrine. Whatever is built on land becomes part of the land, owned by the landowner. I couldn't breathe. So you're saying I own nothing? Correct. You have no ownership claim. You're a foreign national who invested capital into property you cannot legally own. Without a proper lease agreement or a corporate structure protecting your investment, you've essentially funded her business. There has to be something I can do. Sue her. Get my money back. Something. Marco sighed, and I heard real sympathy in it. Were you married to Miss Santos? No. Is there a prenuptial agreement? Any kind of partnership agreement? Any corporate entity? No. Nothing like that. We were partners. I trusted her. I understand. But trust is not a legal instrument, Mr. Brennan. The law is clear. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. Period. And without proper documentation, you have no recourse. I felt like I was falling. How much did you spend in total? He asked gently. Just over 300,000 pounds. He winced visibly. Actually winced. I'm very sorry, Mr. Brennan, but you need to understand your position clearly. You have no legal claim to this property. None whatsoever. The land is hers. The buildings are hers. The business is hers. And there's nothing you can do about it. I sat there in his office, in my nice chair, in the air conditioning, and I felt my entire world collapse. Everything I'd built, everything I'd believed, everything I'd hoped for, gone. It had never been mine. It had never been ours. It had always been hers. What do I do now? I asked, and I heard how broken my voice sounded. Marco leaned back in his chair. You accept the loss. You learn from it, and you move on. I know that's not what you want to hear, but fighting this will cost you more money and bring you nothing but pain. Philippine courts are slow, expensive, and the law is not on your side. So I just walk away. Yes, Mr. Brennan, you walk away, before you lose anything else. I drove back to Palawan in a fog. 7 hours on the road, and I don't remember a single minute of it. My mind was empty and screaming at the same time. When I got to the resort, it was late afternoon. Golden hour. Everything looked beautiful, perfect, like a postcard, like a dream. Lorie was in the office, going over bookings with Bobby. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. Hey, you're back. How was Manila? Did you get your errands done? I didn't smile back. We need to talk, privately. Her smile faded when she saw my face. Bobby, can you give us a minute? Bobby looked between us, then stood up. Sure. I'll check on the pool maintenance. He left, closing the door behind him. What's wrong? Lorie asked. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. Her desk. In her office, in her resort. I went to see a solicitor, Marco Velasco, in Manila. She went very still. Why would you do that? Because I wanted to understand my legal position, our agreement, the property documents. And he told me the truth, that I own nothing. The land is yours. The buildings are yours. Everything is yours. That lease agreement we signed, it's worthless, unenforceable. Lorie leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Keith, you gave me this. You wanted to build this resort. You wanted to help my family. No one forced you to do any of it. But you said we were partners. You said this was ours. And we were partners while we were building it. But Keith, you knew the land had to be in my name. That's Philippine law. I explained that to you. You said I'd have protection. You said the lease would protect me. She shrugged, and the casual gesture felt like a slap. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Did you love me? At any point, did you actually love me? She looked away, out the window at the ocean, at the resort we built together, that she now owned alone. When she looked back at me, her face was calm, empty. I cared about you, Keith. I still do. You're a good man, but you knew what this was. No, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't. I thought this was real. I thought we were building a future together. We did build something. This, she gestured at the resort around us, and you can stay if you want. You can stay in one of the cottages. I won't charge you rent. You can live here. I stared at her. That's it? That's all you have to say? I can stay in a cottage on property I paid for? She stood up, smoothing her shirt. Keith, I don't know what you want me to say. You made your choices. I made mine. This is how things are now. Did you ever love me at all?" She paused at the door. "Does it matter?" Then she walked out, leaving me sitting there alone in her office. And I realized the answer was no. It didn't matter, because either way, I'd lost everything. I left the office and walked down to the beach. The sunset was spectacular, orange and pink and purple spreading across the sky. Tourists were taking photos. A couple was holding hands in the water. Everything looked perfect, like paradise. I sat in the sand and put my head in my hands. That's when Delia found me. She was my neighbor, an elderly Filipina woman who lived in a small house just down the coast from the resort. I'd met her a few times in passing. She'd always been kind, quiet. She sat down next to me without asking permission. "You found out?" she said quietly. Not a question, a statement. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "How did you know?" "I've lived here a long time, Mr. Keith, since my husband died 20 years ago. I've seen this story before, too many times. Why didn't you warn me? Someone should have warned me." She looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. "Would you have listened?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "No, probably not." She nodded. "Men like you never do. You come here hurt, lonely, looking for something you lost, looking for someone to make the pain go away, and you think love will fix everything. But love doesn't fix anything, Mr. Keith. It just makes you vulnerable. It opens you up so the knife can get in deeper." We sat in silence for a long time, watching the waves. "What do I do now?" I asked finally. Delia looked at me. "You go home, you heal, and you forgive yourself, because staying here will only make it worse. This place will only remind you of what you lost. You need to leave. I don't know if I can. You can. You're stronger than you think. You survived losing your wife. You'll survive losing this too." I knew she was right. But God, it hurt. It hurt so much I could barely breathe. I booked a flight back to the UK for the following week. British Airways. One way. I didn't tell Lorie right away. I just started packing quietly. On my last day, I walked through the resort one final time. Every corner, every building, every detail I'd planned and paid for. The pool sparkled in the sunlight, tiles I'd chosen personally. The cottages were pristine, with the hardwood floors I'd insisted on. The bar had a fresh coat of paint that gleamed. Everything I'd envisioned, everything I'd created, everything I'd lost. Lorie's family was already moving in. I saw Tito June on the pool deck, setting up a hammock. He waved at me cheerfully like nothing had changed. Carmen's kids were splashing in the pool, laughing and screaming. Her kids who I'd paid school fees for. Bobby was installing new furniture in the main building, furniture I'd never seen before. Lorie stood in the office window, watching me. Our eyes met for a long moment. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't come outside. She just watched me walk away from everything we'd built. I stood at the entrance for a long time, memorizing every detail. The sign, the path, the palm trees, the ocean beyond. Then I turned and walked to the taxi waiting on the road. I didn't look back. At the airport, I sat in the departure lounge with my notebook, the one I'd kept since Margaret died. I'd barely written in it since meeting Lorie, but now I opened it and wrote, "I thought love meant giving everything. I was wrong. Love means being seen, really seen, for who you are, not what you can provide. And I was only ever seen as useful, as a solution, as money, never as a person worth loving for myself." The flight home was 13 hours. I didn't sleep, just stared out the window at the darkness, thinking about everything, every conversation, every decision, every red flag I'd ignored because I wanted so badly to believe I could be happy again. Manchester felt different when I got back. Colder, obviously, but also smaller, older, like the city had aged while I was gone, Or maybe I just changed too much to see it the same way. I rented a small flat in the northern quarter, 1 bedroom, barely any furniture, just a bed, a table, a chair. It was all I needed. I didn't tell my old friends the full story, just that things didn't work out in the Philippines, that we wanted different things, that I was back for good now. They nodded sympathetically, bought me pints at the pub, told me there were plenty more fish in the sea, but they didn't understand. How could they? I'd given everything, my money, my hope, my belief that I deserved happiness, and I'd lost it all, lost myself in the process. For the first few months, I barely left the flat. I'd wake up, make tea, and stare out the window at the street below, watching people go to work, watching life happen without me. I thought about Lorie constantly, what she was doing, if she ever thought about me, if she felt anything at all. I wanted to be angry. I tried to be angry, but mostly I just felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside me and removed everything important. My daughter Emily came to visit after I'd been back 2 months. She took one look at me and started crying. "Dad, you look terrible. Have you been eating?" "Sometimes." "Have you been talking to anyone?" "Not really." She sat me down and made me call a therapist. "You can't do this alone, Dad. You can't just disappear into yourself. Margaret wouldn't want this. I don't want this." So I started seeing someone. Dr. Sarah Chen. Kind eyes. Patient voice. She let me talk for the whole first session without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You wanted to save her." "What?" "Lorie, you wanted to save her family. And in doing so, you lost yourself. You confused love with rescue, with providing, with being needed." She was right, but knowing that didn't make it easier. We met twice a week for months. Slowly, the fog started to lift. I started going for walks, joined a walking group for retired people, met some folks, went for coffee, started living again, inch by inch. I sold the last of my overseas investments, some stocks I'd forgotten about, an old retirement account. I wasn't rich anymore, not even close, but I had enough to live on. A small pension, some savings. It would have to be enough. I started thinking about what came next, maybe volunteering, maybe part-time work, maybe just being alive was enough for now. One evening, about a year after I'd returned, my phone buzzed. A Facebook message from Delia Reyes. She'd sent a photo. The resort's new sign. Bright blue letters, professional looking. Santos Family Beach Resort. Established 2024. I stared at it for a long time, felt different things. Anger, sadness, regret, but mostly just tired. Just so tired of carrying it all. I wanted to feel rage. I wanted to feel betrayed. I wanted to feel something sharp enough to cut, but all I felt was exhausted. Exhausted from being angry. Exhausted from feeling like a victim. Exhausted from wishing things had been different. I opened my notebook and wrote one final entry about Lorie. About the resort, about everything. Her family's future. And I convinced myself it was love. But love doesn't feel like this. Love doesn't leave you empty. Love doesn't make you smaller. I wanted to be needed. I wanted to matter. And she saw that need and used it. But I let her. I chose not to see the red flags. I chose to ignore my doubts. I chose to keep giving, even when it hurt. That's my responsibility, not hers. I read it twice. Then I closed the notebook and put it away in a drawer. I didn't need to keep looking backward. I'd spent £300,000, a fortune, more than most people see in a lifetime. And in return, I got a lesson I'll never forget. You can't buy love. You can't buy belonging. And you can't save someone who sees you as a solution instead of a person. It took me a year to stop checking her Facebook. Another 6 months to stop dreaming about the resort. But eventually, I did. I started focusing on my own life, my own healing, my own future, whatever that looked like now. I'm 65 now. I rent a flat. I walk every morning in Heaton Park, the same park Margaret and I used to visit. I see my therapist twice a month instead of twice a week. I volunteer at a food bank on Wednesdays. I have dinner with Emily once a week. I'm not rich anymore, not even comfortable, but I'm not broken either. Not anymore. Some days, I think about going back, just to see the place one more time, to see what became of everything I built. But I know I won't. That chapter is closed. The resort was never mine. The love was never real. And the man I was when I met Lorie, he's gone too. But the man I am now, he's still here, still learning, still healing. And maybe that's enough. Maybe being enough is all I need to be. I can live with that. I have to live with that. Because what other choice do I have?